How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we've got our Week 11 running back rankings, our top 24 of them here again for Week 11 action. If you'd like access to our numbers 25 through 48 rankings, those can be found on our website, sizzlefantasy.com, through the SFS Gold membership section. If you'd like a free month of SFS Gold, a way you can get yourself hooked up with that is through checking out one of our awesome partners here on the channel, ThriveFantasy.com, our favorite way to bet player props this NFL season. It's Thursday. That means we've got Thursday Night Football and props going live for this evening. We've got two props for today. Our other prop is posted on our wide receiver rankings for Week 11. But in today's video, here is our other prop where we've got Mac Jones on the under for today's game. I think, to be honest, the reason I've got Mac Jones on the under is I don't think he's going to have to pass for that many yards. I think the Pats are going to control the pace of this game, ultimately run the football effectively, and with a very banged-up Falcons team who I think is going to struggle to move the ball consistently throughout drives, I think, again, the Pats will control the clock, control the game, and ultimately win this football game by, it might end up being not too high scoring, but I think that New England will have their way. And then on the other side of things, we've got the over on Russell Gage. Bill Belichick, he's going to make this team play left-handed. They already don't have Cordero Patterson, so that's already a huge disadvantage. And in terms of the Falcons playing balanced football, I don't think they're going to have a very strong rushing attack. And I think that Bill is going to focus on taking away Kyle Pitts in this matchup and forcing Matty Ice to beat him with other options in this passing game. To me, that says Russell Gage. I'm going to say that Matty Ice is going to force feed him the ball a little bit, get him some looks. 42.5 yards at the end of the day isn't a terribly high marker to have to get over. So I think there's some decent potential there. But go sign up for an account on ThriveFantasy.com. You'll get yourself that free month of SFS Gold by creating an account, depositing between $10 and $100, and using promo code Sizzle when you do so. That'll get you access. Again, they'll give you a 100% match bonus. So if you put $100 in, they're going to give you $100 for free just for signing up and, again, using that promo code. And then they'll let us know within a few days that you have done so. Went ahead and play the contest on Thrive, and then we'll turn around, get you set up with your SFS Gold membership, and you'll get access to all those features for an entire month, absolutely on us, just for supporting Thrive and in turn supporting the SFS brand. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's not waste any more time. That's a lot of talking. Let's hit the intro and get right in to our top running back here in Week 11. Alrighty, our top running back for this week's action has got to be Christian McCaffrey here, taking on the Washington football team. He got a little nicked up last week, didn't see too much work in the second half, but when he's out there on the field, when he's expected to play, he's almost got to be a weekly top 3 running back start. And for a player who can walk out on the field and score you an absurd amount of fantasy points by simply having almost 200 scrimmage yards in any given contest because of his level of dynamic ability and just the capability he has to get 100 yards rushing and get dang near that marker in the receiving game as well and score those points without even potentially having a touchdown, this is one of the best situations there is. It's a can't overlook here, and against Washington, which has been an exploitable rushing defense here, this is an opportunity I love for McCaffrey at 1. Najee Harris, we're a little bit ahead of him, or at least higher on him than some other fantasy outlets out there, but the Los Angeles defense has really struggled against fantasy running backs. They are currently 29th in terms of allowing fantasy points to opposing running backs in backfields. And Najee Harris is seeing a ridiculous amount of volume right now. 22 or more carries, forget the receiving game, in which Najee is, again, a very dynamic back, just like a Christian McCaffrey. Not quite to that extent in the passing game yet, but certainly a 3-down back, a goal line player who's going to get carries and opportunities and that facet of things. And again, 22 carries, let alone touches, and is an absurd marker to be at. You give me a nice matchup on top of that, and I'm loving Najee here in Week 11. Dalvin Cook at number 3, taking on the Green Bay Packers here. This matchup is a little bit tougher than it might seem, but Dalvin's going to get a lot of volume in this matchup. 18 or more carries in every game he's played this season. He has missed a couple contests due to some injuries, but he's healthy now. He's fine. Dalvin actually last season completely took over a game against my Packers and literally beat them single-handedly. He's a beast. The Packers, I would say, have had struggles against the run game. They certainly get gashed here and there, and Dalvin Cook is an explosive player in the open field and someone hard to bring down. Again, I'm expecting a high touch load, a high workload for Cook here in Week 11. He should be a top fantasy back for all scoring formats. Jonathan Taylor might be the best running back in fantasy football right now, but he has also drawn the best opposing rushing defense in the NFL this season. The Buffalo Bills are number one in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to opposing running backs. That's bad news for Jonathan Taylor and this Colts offense. One concern I have is if wild Carson Wentz gets a little turnover happy here and the Colts fall behind by multiple scores. What does that mean for Jonathan Taylor's workload perhaps in the second half of this contest? But JT is as explosive as it gets. He was actually, I don't know if this is still upstanding right now, but at one time he was responsible for the two highest speeds of a player touching the football in the NFL this season. So he's got track-like speed. He ran track at the University of Wisconsin. He's an explosive athlete, again, running behind one of the best offensive lines in football. Not the best anymore, but definitely up there. Explosive abilities, 3-down workhorse, goal line asset. He checks all the boxes. It's just the matchup is pretty dang tough this week. Nick Chubb against the Detroit Lions, number 5 here for us. I expect Nick Chubb in a week where, technically, I will preface this, Chubb at the time of posting this video has not cleared COVID protocol, so we might not see Nick Chubb this week. Who knows? I'm hoping and very optimistic that he should be able to get over those hurdles and suit up for this matchup. It's a very good opportunity for him and the Cleveland Browns to run the football effectively here. With that being said, if he ends up not playing, if for some reason he can't clear those COVID protocols, don't come after me for this one in the comment section. We're going to be cautious on this one here and at least acknowledge that that's the case. He's not a lock to play this week. Dearness Johnson, if he was to fill in again here, would become a very, very valuable lineup play. But again, the optimism is, the hope is that Nick Chubb can play this week. Again, if he does, I expect very efficient yards per carry. I expect this team to run the football and control this entire game, to be honest. We saw Ramondre Stevenson average 5 yards per carry, 20 rushes, 100 yards last week, have a very productive day. No Kareem Hunt back for the Browns yet. Nick Chubb's in for a full workload if he's able to start this game. Alvin Kamara, another player. Don't come after me if he doesn't end up playing. He returned to practice, but in a limited fashion. Again, he was out last week. If you missed that against the Titans, Mark Ingram had over 100 yards from scrimmage in that game and a touchdown, so very productive numbers from him in Kamara's absence, But Alvin Kamara is clearly a top-level fantasy back when he's healthy and when he's available for us to play him. Against Philadelphia, the 27th ranked rushing defense right now, or rushing attack. They're the 27th ranked unit against a fantasy running back. Let's put it that way. Alvin Kamara's got an opportunity to be successful on the ground, and as always, his biggest asset, his biggest weapon for fantasy lineups, in PPR leagues especially, is the efficiency he gets out of the passing game. If he finds the end zone, Kamara's a top-level fantasy option for us this week. Again, the health is the biggest concern coming into this matchup. Zeke at number 7 against Kansas City here. I expect the Cowboys to come in with a balanced approach, try and keep this as close as possible to a 50-50 balanced attack offensively. I think they're going to have a lot of success here. I'm not worried. I talked about this with CeeDee Lamb in the wide receivers episode. I'm not too concerned about the Kansas City Chiefs defense and the steps forward they've taken the last 2 weeks against the Jordan Love-led Packers in his first NFL start. And who they play after that? The Raiders, who looked very out of whack and out of sync in that contest. Derek Carr was quite literally, like, the timer was running out in his head, and he just chucked the ball up. Like, I saw a meme. It was quite funny. It was like, sometimes, Derek Carr's a good quarterback, but in the middle of the game, he just computer resets and just chucks the ball up in the air. That's what he was doing against the Chiefs on Sunday night. Nonetheless, though, I don't think Kansas City all of a sudden became world beaters on the defensive side of the ball. Zeke should have his way here. This is a matchup which he can exploit. They're no dominant rushing defense. They are 14th against fantasy running backs, so it's not like it's a cakewalk. But again, I think Dallas has the offensive firepower, the personnel to keep this defense honest, be able to hit them with deep balls over the top, and that's going to back those safeties up, keep the box light for Zeke. All that stuff's going to factor in here. I think Zeke will be a very quality RB1 start. I would love to have Austin Ekeler higher on the list for today's episode. But with how the production has been on a steady decline, he still had a 20-plus point game in the last 4 weeks, but compared to the hot start he had to begin the season, the numbers comparatively haven't been quite as high over the last month-long stretch. Austin Ekeler, though, is a super dynamic back still, though. He is, I've called him all season, mini McCaffrey. He scores touchdowns, catches passes, 3 or more receptions in every game this year. The matchup's just a little tough this week. Pittsburgh is the number 5 ranked unit against fantasy running backs. Ekeler will get his work, though. He'll get his opportunities in the receiving game. I've still got him as a strong start this week. And overall, I would say I feel very strong and very confident in the top 10 of the rankings list for Week 11. I think that all these players are capable of having top-level performances. It just comes down to, at the end of the day, matchups are how the order has fallen for me the vast majority of times here, because all these players are seeing dynamic usage outside of maybe a Nick Chubb. All these players are highly talented backs playing in good offenses. I like a lot of these situations in general a lot here in Week 11, as I said, for these top 10 players. We'll get into how that switches up here in just a second, though, as we get further down the list. Joe Mixon against the Raiders, my number 9 back. Again, someone I feel very, very good about this week. Joe Mixon's touches in total volume has been on the decline as of late, but the efficiency, the touchdown production, it's been there, and the point totals and fantasy outputs have been up. And that's something you love to see. 20 or more points through the last 4 games he's played. They're coming off the bye week here. I love the situation. I think Joe Mixon is absolutely a workhorse running back. Again, the numbers may not have reflected that as extremely as it has been earlier on in the season or even looking back to last year. But you get the 25th ranked opposing defense against fantasy running backs, and you get a rested and healthy offense here. Hopefully Joe Mixon is totally healthy now after battling his way back from that ankle injury earlier on in the season, and now having the bye week to hopefully, again, make things even better if they weren't already back to 100%. So I love Joe Mixon the rest of this season. I love the matchup here in Week 11. Number 9, I would say, is relatively low to have him. But again, that goes back to the other matchups I really like this week, the other situations I'm all over. James Conner has also become a workhorse back here in the last couple weeks. Chase Edmonds heads to the IR. Now James Conner is the clear top dog to get the receiving and rushing involvement for this Cardinals backfield. And he's got Seattle this week now. We forgot to put the matchup up on the screen, but Seattle is one of the worst rushing defensive units in the league. James Conner is going to have an efficient day here. He leads the league in rushing touchdowns. This is overall a great situation, and he's shown us the ability to produce, whether it's Kyler Murray on the field or if it's Colt McCoy. Kyler is back at practice. It sounds like he might just play this week. We'll see. The verdict is still out on that. But either way, I'm feeling very, very good about James Conner here in this week. A.J. Dillon against the Minnesota Vikings. 3-down workhorse right here. Almost no competition for touches in this Packers offense with Aaron Jones out of the lineup. This is just going to be an opportunity for an individual player to see a ridiculous amount of work, get all of the goal line carries, get all of the receiving involvement for an entire game. And that is going to potentially have A.J. Dillon land higher than this number 11 spot. We talked about it earlier on in the week. I said, hey, if Aaron Jones is out of the lineup, A.J. Dillon is basically the only option the Packers have to hand the football to. Minnesota's not a terribly difficult unit to run the ball against. They're no easy cakewalk either. But for an average level matchup, I think the volume, the efficiency might not be spectacular, but the volume will make up the difference here. Again, if he gets a couple goal line carries, punches one or so of those in, you're looking at a really strong outing for a player who's coming in as a handcuff reserve option for a lot of teams. DeAndre Swift at number 12 against Cleveland. I didn't like the fact that he was so low on the list today. Obviously, as involved as he is as a pass catcher, he's got himself a very real upside on a week-to-week basis. And we loved what we saw last week in terms of him running the ball 33 times. Now, that might be a bit much for my taste. I think I'd rather see DeAndre Swift stay clean and healthy in terms of, the 130 rushing yards were great, but he didn't add too much in the receiving game in that performance against the Steelers in that overtime tie. I was going to say overtime loss, just with it being the Lions, but it was a tie. I'll give you guys that. You Detroit fans out there, hopefully that, I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. If you're a Lions fan, are you more salty about a tie, or would you just rather have the loss? I truly am wondering. I feel like when I'm a spoiled, rotten Packer fan, I will acknowledge that. I feel like when my team ends in a tie, it's almost less satisfying than if you were to just take the loss and just move on with it. And then you move on with your day. A tie, I always feel so unsatisfied. So off topic, besides the point there. DeAndre Swift here, though, seeing Dan Campbell's reluctancy to let Jared Goff even drop back for the simplest of throws, is something I think is also a red flag. You could potentially see the Lions get a bad game script here if Cleveland is able to control this game like I think they can. I'm not a Baker guy. He's been embarrassed the last couple weeks here, but the Lions are quite a pitiful disaster. So Swift, I still really like him as a top 12 running back. He is indeed an RB1 for me this week. At the end of the day, I have my questions about how high his ceiling can actually get in this matchup. And the Browns, again, are not a super easy matchup either. They're in the middle of the pack, 17th against fantasy running backs. Leonard Fournette's my number 13 back here. How he has really blossomed throughout this season, especially as a receiving asset in this Buccaneers offense. That's something I love to see. He's getting the goal line carries. He's essentially kicked Ronald Jones out of this backfield pretty much. Fournette has taken over as the fantasy asset to own here. The Giants are one of those teams, again, they're trending up right now defensively. They've been playing better football over the past couple of weeks than they were earlier on this season. But Tom Brady, Tampa Bay coming off of a bad loss last week to the Washington football team. This is the type of team and the type of culture I expect to cinch things up, fix their mistakes, and ultimately get back to where they want to be at here in Week 11. And that's controlling games, winning football, and playing against a team that I would say they are far superior to. I think that there's an opportunity for Fournette in the second half to get a lot of volume if Tampa happens to be leading this game by a large margin. So you get a couple goal line carries in this matchup. You get the level of receiving involvement he had last week. Leonard Fournette had 9 targets against Washington. That's a great number to have for running back. Now, the majority of that was because they were trailing for so long, but that still shows they're willing to pass him the football out of the backfield. I love Fournette here. I think this week is one of the last games that I really, truly love Fournette for this season. He's been one of my favorite fantasy sweethearts, if you will, throughout the year as a sleeper pick in drafts that I ended up getting in a few leagues, and then it played out very well for me. In the fantasy postseason, he's got quite a brutal schedule, so if you've got any last-minute aspirations of trading him after this week, might be an opportunity to do that. James Robinson at number 14 against the 49ers this week, another back who doesn't have an amazing matchup, but James Robinson is just a workhorse. He showed us coming off that heel injury last week. He's able to put up points and get the job done. 15 touches before the bye week. I think that Jacksonville has a puncher's chance of keeping this close against San Francisco, but if the 49ers play the way they did last week, there might be a little bit of a concern for game script. Nonetheless, the Jags offense goes as James Robinson does, and for a player who's been seeing such a heavy level of involvement from his offense and whose offense is so dependent on his ability to help them sustain drives, Robinson's going to get enough volume to hopefully maintain some level of fantasy relevancy even if this game gets out of hand. And again, for the player who sees basically all of their goal line work, sees involvement in the receiving game, I trust James to be a very, very steady floor option in this matchup, even if his ceiling doesn't get too high. David Montgomery is another matchup on paper. This actually looks like a favorable matchup, the 21st ranked Baltimore Ravens rushing defense. But I'm still a little bit cautiously optimistic with David Montgomery here. This is a player who, in my eyes, is a clear workhorse. I love the schedule the rest of the season. I'm a huge David Montgomery fan. I think he's rested up after that Pittsburgh game where he came back and had his first action since that hyperextended knee. He had 15 touches again before the bye week. David Montgomery, I think, can have serviceable numbers here. I would say he's more of a floor play than a ceiling option this week, but I still, again, really, really like the utility he can provide to lineups. I'm hoping he can take that next step forward after that Pittsburgh contest in terms of showing he's back to being David Montgomery week in and week out and getting the volume that I think he deserves. We'll see if that's the case here. I think he's a middle-of-the-pack running back, too, in this contest. And if we see him have a big game here, that'll be good news, and we'll trend him up higher the rest of the way. Elijah Mitchell against San Francisco, taking on the Jags here. This is one where I think we talked about James Robinson just a second ago. If things get ugly for Jacksonville, and if Elijah Mitchell and the San Fran offense are able to play as physical as they did against the Rams last week, they could potentially have a lot of second-half rushing opportunities. San Francisco ran the ball over 40 times last week. I don't know if they'll get to that number again here. That's a pretty astronomical number to be at for any offense. But Elijah Mitchell is a tough back. He has become a really stable running back, too, for lineups week in and week out. And this is a matchup where they can take advantage of that and have some nice numbers. So Elijah Mitchell is certainly a dependable start this week. If you're just looking for someone to give you steady Eddie numbers, this is who to look to. I think that, between him and David Montgomery, that's kind of what we were getting at with that assessment, is that I don't think David's going to put up super high ceiling numbers this week. He's a very dependable floor running back 2 option. I feel the same for Elijah Mitchell here in a matchup I love. I think the 49ers can control the clock and pace of this game for the majority. Antonio Gibson, we're still going to be a little bit conservative with our ranking of him here this week at the number 17 spot. Taking on the Panthers, not a super easy matchup. Now, we have seen Ramondre Stevenson, who's actually the reserve back for the Patriots, kind of pushed them around a couple weeks back. Damien Harris, the starter in that game, actually struggled a bit. But the main thing I like here is Antonio Gibson has regained his health. 26 total touches against Tampa Bay last week, and you get Brandon Schrift back, your star interior guard, which really helped open up some running lanes for this offense a week ago. I think that the Washington football team, this will be an interesting game to watch because of the Cam storyline, but especially for Antonio Gibson owners, you'll want to tune into this game, see if the volume, see if the usage, the workload, how Antonio Gibson's being deployed in this backfield is for real, and assess that for his status on your team moving forward the rest of the season. I personally believe that Antonio Gibson is going to be a quality and very useful lineup piece the rest of the way this season, but this will be a big telltale game in terms of how that's going to look for him the rest of the year if this is a normal and competitive football game. Saquon Barkley, someone we are very low on this week. Now, I had to give Saquon the respect of not letting him dip below the top 20, but there are probably going to be some upset fantasy managers this week because the ranking is so low. The explanation for this, though, is it's Saquon's first game back in a multi-week period. That's something we're always very cautious of here at SFS. I don't like to place too high of expectations on players after they've missed multiple performances, or even one game for that matter. That's still something to take into consideration and to be relatively conservative with in terms of your assessment of a player on a week-to-week basis. Saquon also draws. Buffalo, we talked about statistically, is the top rushing defense in the league. I think Tampa Bay is right there with them, neck and neck. I would say Tampa Bay is the fantasy matchup I am most afraid of for opposing running backs this season and last year for that matter. And Saquon draws that in his first game back off of an injury. Manage your expectations this week. That's all I'm going to say. He's got bust alert written all over him. He still, again, deserves the respect of being a lineup play. He's a must-start player if he's in your, well, I wouldn't put him on the must-start running backs list for Week 11, but in terms of him being an asset that should be in fantasy lineups, that's still what Saquon Barkley is this week because his talent and explosiveness gives him the opportunity to go out there and make a big splash play to keep him relevant. But this is a tough matchup, a tough ask of Saquon in his first week back to the lineup. Damien Harris, another player who missed last week's game and coming back here, playing tonight on Thursday night. We've got our Falcons and Patriots prop bets. Go watch Damien Harris, see how he bodes in that game. Our other prop, a little spoiler alert here if you're still watching today's episode. If you haven't already checked out the wide receiver episode, we posted our second of those 2 prop bets on Thrive Fantasy. Damien Harris was involved in one of those games. We picked the over for him. The line was 57.5 rushing yards. So Harris against Atlanta. Again, I think the Pats control the tempo of this game. They control the play style and how this game script works out here. They're the better football team at this point. They're the healthier team. I think it just works in their favor. And I think that's going to result in a nice workload for Damien Harris, who has cleared the concussion protocols. Michael Carter, we're starting to get into, after Michael Carter and our next running back here, players I'm not so excited about this week. But because they're starting running backs for NFL teams and because of the injuries we've got at the position right now, they cracked the top 24. That's just how it goes sometimes. Michael Carter, though, is someone we're still confident about here. Dynamic pass-catching ability, rushing ability. He does have 4 rushing touchdowns in the last 6 weeks. That's an impressive marker for a 5'8" running back of relatively small stature. Carter's explosive. He's shifty. He's dynamic out of the backfield. And the Dolphins are a team you can run the ball against. I think that I would like to see Joe Flacco give him the ball out in space in the flats a bit. That's something that with the legend Mike White, poor Mike White, I absolutely love that guy, being benched. Joe Flacco now will step in and hopefully pick up the win for the Jets against Miami this week. Josh Jacobs at number 21 taking on the Bengals. This was a run defense that got off to the races and was hot to start this season and has since cooled down to a major level. They have been underproducing, underwhelming, and letting up huge yards after contact. If Josh Jacobs can break a few tackles, he could be in for a very big game here and actually outperform my expectations for him this week. The reason I've got him so low is just based off of what we saw from the Raiders offense against a Kansas City defense that I still don't respect very much at this point in time. They've got some playmakers. I love Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu, but outside of that, you're still starting Daniel Sorensen out there and giving old 49, who after he got that goofy pick he took off his helmet and he's basically bald. He's got the same haircut as my grandpa. So that was kind of made me chuckle a little bit there. Josh Jacobs though, he's a quality RB2 start this week. I'd say I'd give him a dependable floor assessment here, but I wouldn't expect too much out of this ceiling. But again, if he does break those tackles, he could have a very, very nice game. Darrel Williams for the number 22 spot. We got some unexpected news out of Andy Reid this week. Last week, Eric Bieniemy said that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had returned from the injured reserve to practice, looked very good, but Coach Reid said that there's a chance Clyde Edwards-Helaire might not return until week 13. So I thought that was something that was very interesting and keeps Darrel Williams right in the thick of things for being a starting level asset in fantasy lineups. Now, if something were to change, if Clyde were to some reason suit up, Darrel obviously moves down the list and becomes a less viable lineup option. But I mean, he had 9 targets and 9 receptions last week. He is a really good receiving back. Went up and made a Moss touchdown reception this past week. He's an underrated player. He's a really nice asset. He's kind of a complete back. He can bruise players down the goal line. And again, Patrick Mahomes after the game kind of goofed around and said, yeah, Darrel Williams actually refers to himself and tells him he's a receiving back all the time. So Darrel put his money where his mouth was, went out there and caught dang near double-digit receptions for a guy who you look at and think is a goal line back. Wow, that's impressive stuff against Dallas this week. I'd expect the Chiefs to be passing the ball over the yard after the success they had last week, but you never know. Darrel could just have a really nice game here. Myles Gaskin. Now, these are the 2 players I'm really unexcited for, and you're gonna hear the enthusiasm I have about these players. Take it on the Jets. I mean, Myles Gaskin against a matchup last week where, on paper, going back to David Montgomery, their matchup, the Ravens are the 21st ranked unit against the opposing fantasy running back. Myles Gaskin, in a game in which the Dolphins controlled, only managed 31 yards on 14 rushing attempts. That is very poor production. Now, every once in a while, he can come out here and give you some value as a receiver and give you some utility in that facet of things. If the Dolphins come out and control this game, maybe you get some passing attempts and has a decent outing. But Gaskin overall, in general, is not a player I like this fantasy season. Definitely one of the busts of the year and someone we didn't like even dating back to the draft process. And then Davonte Freeman here. And now I look at it, Davonte Freeman is spelt improperly. We've got an incorrect A there. That should be an E, I believe. At our number 24 spot, taking on the Chicago Bears. This is, again, a tougher matchup. We saw Najee Harris struggle to run the football. Now, he did have a successful fantasy outing, but actual rushing yards against this Bears defense is no easy task. And you're in a committee system with Freeman to begin with, so he's already divvying up his touches and carries with other players. Hasn't seen more than 13 rushing attempts in an individual contest yet this season. All things that I don't love about this Ravens backfield. The running back to own, if you will, is Lamar Jackson now. That's a joke I actually don't really like because Lamar is a very competent quarterback in this league. But Davonte Freeman, he's a starting level running back for an NFL team this week. With the injuries we have, with a couple of bye weeks, he squeaks in here to our top 24 rankings, but you never know. Things could change by game time on Sunday. Alrighty, those were our top 24 running backs here for Week 11 action. Remember, if you want to get access to the rest of our weekly rankings, go check out SFS Gold. You can get a free month by checking out ThriveFantasy.com and depositing between $10 and $100 with promo code Sizzle. Again, they will match you whatever you put in up to $100, and then they will let us know, contact us, and reach out, letting us know that you have signed up, deposited, and played using Thrive's site. And once that all has happened, you will get yourself a free month of gold and access to our exclusive rankings and membership service here on the channel. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't checked out the wide receivers rendition of this episode, go take a look at that before you head on out. And we'll see you guys there. Peace out.